Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in here to our eduWebinar Lunch and Learn series. eduWeb's planning to do a few of these throughout the summer. Certainly a new and different time for all of us, but great opportunities as well as challenges, certainly working from home and this new kind of landscape. But excited to try to add some value here for our eduWeb community doing this webinar series. And so we're excited to bring this to you and hopefully share some exciting things with you. We really do appreciate you joining us. We understand there are so many webinars out there right now. You've got a lot of professional development experiences popping up all over the place. So we are humbled and grateful and flattered that you're with us here today. But yeah, we will get going into this. As we said, this is the first of what we hope are a few that we're able to bring throughout the summer. Really hoping to add value and insight for everyone working in higher ed marketing and communications throughout this industry, throughout the eduWeb community. Such an important time for all of us to kind of hone our skills and also come together as a community. We'll be talking about our university communities today on our separate campuses. As a higher education social media community, this is an interesting time for all of us to come together as well. So we're glad to be together here virtually and come together as a community. My name is John McBride, happy to moderate today's discussion a little, and thrilled to be joined by two colleagues in the industry whose work I greatly admire, Erin Supinka at Dartmouth and Tony Dobies at West Virginia. Really excited to have them here, and we'll hop into things here in a minute and listen to what they have to say. Megan, I'm still not seeing slides coming through. Looks like we're still on that first introductory screen. If we want to get the slides going here, I think we are ready to hop into things. I will mention as we try to get those slides up, the format we have today will start off with some brief presentations. We'll start with Erin, then go to Toby, and then myself. That'll kind of, or Tony, excuse me. There we go, slides are up. So we'll talk through we'll talk through brief presentations from each of us to start, then we'll go into Q&A. But as I said, use that eduWebinar hashtag. We'd love to have you share your insights there as you switch between watching and perhaps eating lunch and tweeting. I know we're asking a lot of you, but as you switch through those different things, that's the hashtag we'll be using today. Then that next slide, we'll talk about questions here. We want to take your questions today for sure. That's what the second half of this is about. So use the questions module right there in your GoToWebinar panel. We'll be monitoring those questions as we go throughout today, and we'll keep tabs on those and try to answer as many as we can as we get to the second half of today's presentation. But with that, let's hop right into Erin. We are really excited to talk about such an important topic today, finding ways to build up our digital communities, really offer them strength and hope, but also resources and connection can be vitally important for our communities right now. So we'll first hear from Erin Supinka and the work she's doing at Dartmouth College. She's going to show us some of her amazing work and how she's been able to build community there. Erin, over to you.
Hi, thanks so much, John. And I'm so glad that everyone tuning in is taking their lunch hour to spend it with us to talk about this stuff. I've been talking a little bit with other folks in the industry about how it's kind of nice to talk about COVID in a different capacity. I mean, COVID is still pretty much consuming our lives, but at least in this type of conversation, we can critique back and forth and kind of look at things critically and not just in crisis mode. And so, Megan, if you want to head to the next slide, I wanted to highlight some examples that I've personally been collecting around the higher ed social media space. And so the first example that I saw pretty early on is from NYU Zoom. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because at Dartmouth, we've really transitioned our social strategy to being more focused on or increasing the amount of time we're spending on social care. Social care has always been a part of our social strategy, thinking about our community and the things that they need to get through the different parts of their lives as a student, alum, etc. But as we've transitioned into this COVID time period, it's been more and more important to us to connect with our community and give them the resources that they need and that they're used to having access to, as well as providing, acknowledgement that we're here and that we're listening and that we are truly in this together with them. I know that's kind of been the buzzword, is we're in this together, but it's true. I mean, the social media manager behind the account that you're tweeting at is also dealing with the COVID crisis in their own ways. And so I think revealing that and sharing that with our communities only helps us connect with them further. And so I loved this example from NYU with just kind of talking through Zoom. We all switched to Zoom essentially overnight in a lot of ways. Some of us may have been more familiar with it, but I just loved the way that they approached this and made it tangible and accessible to users, so that they kind of showed we're all starting on the same page here. Here's the basics, here's the questions you need to know, and if you have a problem, here's exactly where you go to reach out. Megan, we can jump to the next slide. And so another quick survey of higher ed. The other thing that I really loved, and we'll talk about when we get to the Dartmouth slides that I've pulled up as well, is how people went about sharing important information. And I've captured a few examples here from a few different universities around the states, and just looking at how they chose simple designs, brand colors to highlight the message that they were really trying to get out. I think a lot of the times we're looking at how do we make our social media more engaging, and sometimes we lean towards more GIFs and more stickers and more colors and more animations and different things to really busy up the templates. But what I really liked, what I saw coming from a lot of universities and institutions, was this boiling down to what people really needed to know in that moment. And you can see here that things were highlighted carefully and thoughtfully. Megan, if we want to jump to the next slide. This is one of our resources that we've been putting together that we're making regularly available on our channels every Wednesday. And this just produces and makes these different resources accessible to our students and faculty and staff. As you can see, we also target staff here and can, oops, sorry. Guess we're pausing for the poll. And so this is just a quick question here because I wanted to show you this resources campaign that we've been doing about wellness, because this is something that we looked at not only for just COVID right now, but something that we could continue throughout the term once campus life kind of returns to normal. One of the things that we've noticed is that a lot of these resources that we're promoting now have always been available on campus. They may just not have always been so accessible in that we've known about them. Campus is large. There are so many nooks and crannies that there's always things that we miss and we don't catch. And so what we've also been looking at with this resource opportunity is that we're building these out for future content pieces. And so, the FEAP is always available for faculty and staff. Our Tucker Center always has mindful practice groups. They're not necessarily going to be on Zoom once we return to campus, but we're focusing on building out those resources that our campus has and has been revealing to us as, they've been making that switch to online and being kind of pushed to talk about them more and get them out more because they're not having that in-person interaction anymore. Megan, we can jump to the next slide. And the other bit that I wanted to talk a little bit about is the design and the elements of how you're creating content for your communities. And for us, something that I really, really keep in mind when I'm looking at things and when I was looking around at the different examples that higher ed has put out is how we're sharing this information. This particular situation is a crisis. It's a pandemic. It's extremely stressful. It's extremely challenging personally, for me, professionally, all of the above. And the one thing that we wanted to do was steer away from making things too overwhelming. I'm someone who suffers from ADHD, and so one of the things that I really struggle with is overstimulation. And so lots of colors, lots of things can really hype me up in a moment of anxiety. And so what I really wanted to do and what I worked with my social media manager, Brigham, with is toning back what we had been doing on our social media channels to really focus on what was most important and utilizing simple design elements so that we could pull out what was valuable and they needed to know without causing additional stress or anxiety because we were putting out so much information and so much content. So we wanted to really boil it down to the things that they needed to know, and make sure that they were getting it at the times that they needed to know in a place that they could continually come back to. And so as you know, we created these things, and as they're still relevant, we keep them accessible on our highlight reel on Instagram, which is where we do a lot of this content. That's targeted towards students, and also just again making sure that we're constantly providing these updates, even if they've received it already in an email. Having it in another space just makes it in another accessible way to get it to them. If we want to hop to the next slide. And finally, I'm talking one more slide about Instagram stories, and then I did pull 2 examples for other platforms because I love Instagram stories, so I always talk a lot about them, but I wanted to show the other platforms some love. But another really great thing that I've been seeing around our community in higher ed social is taking this really important information, again, and sharing it in ways that is demonstrating to our communities that this is okay. We're all talking about this, and this is what our experts are saying to do. And you know, we're going through these same things, and you know, our professor of counseling and at George Washington University here put together this article that they boiled down into these 5 takeaway points that they made into a visual Instagram story. And again, it's just one of those things where, you know, on the surface, you might think, oh, wow, those are really simple things and tasks. But in a time of COVID, in a time of crisis, these little reminders and these little symbols of, hey, okay, so it's not just me that is realizing that I haven't, you know, changed out of PJs all week, and so this week I'm going to wear jeans, or this week I'm going to actually disconnect from my phone and my computer, because even though I love having Zoom calls with my friends because I miss them so much, it's really important for me to not be connected to my screens as much. And I just really love how higher ed has been utilizing their experts, their faculty experts, to provide resources to their communities. And I loved this example because it made it so tangible and quick and accessible for their audiences on Instagram. And if we want to jump to the next slide. So I wanted to give some love to some other platforms. I actually saw this Hamilton College example at another webinar last week, I believe, and they just went live on a drone and asked their student and their community to send them where they'd like to see. I'm not sure about your audiences, but I know that my audiences are really missing campus, just even the physical location, not just their friends and the community there, but you know, the beautiful sunsets, the green, the common spaces, things like that. And so I know that it's been really an interesting challenge to figure out how we still show those spaces without being too, you know, you don't want to say, oh, look, campus is empty without you, and you know, you don't want to spread that too much around, but you also want to make them feel still connected to the physical space. And I just thought Hamilton's way of engaging their community to make them feel part of their video of campus just helped kind of solve that challenge that I know that I've been kind of going back and forth on. It's how to show our campus and our beautiful location when people can't be here. And then Princeton, I've been a huge fan of Princeton's Twitter threads. I think the team at Princeton has been doing a fantastic job of breaking out what's important, what everyone needs to know, and responding to people and engaging back. And these resources, just making them so accessible and tangible, really, I think, goes back to talking about that social care element and thinking about that while we're always thinking about engaging our audiences and connecting with them, that during this time, we really want to truly focus on that we are human beings back and forth, whether it's through DM, whether it's through comments on a post. One of the things we've been doing is whenever we shift a conversation into a direct message, my social media manager and I are signing our tweets or our DMs or our private messages with our name. We're letting them know that we hope that they're staying well and healthy, that their loved ones are healthy, because what's really important is just continually sending the message that this is really hard and we don't want you to feel like you're going at this alone, that even if you let out your frustrations on Twitter, there is someone here that understands you're frustrated and will and wants to help you, and that they're here too, and they're going through their own things with the pandemic, and that, you know, together you can find a solution that works for both of you and ultimately solves the problem. And so the social care for us has just been a really eye-opening experience, and an awesome opportunity to connect with our audiences, I feel, on a more authentic way. And what's really interesting, I think, is how we're going to carry that on into post-COVID times. And so I think there might be one more poll that pops up. I'm not sure. Yes, and so this is something that I'm super curious about, is that how have you returned to posting as normal, or are you still incorporating COVID updates? What does your daily social strategy look like? Is it normal, or is it changed for good now? Yep, that makes sense to me. I love following all of the different higher ed accounts. I stalk a lot of you, and all of you are doing incredible work. And it's been really fascinating to see and compare, because I screenshot and I save things from all of you. And so just compare what I was screenshotting before COVID and the things I'm screenshotting now. It's both sides are really great. It's just really interesting to see the nuances and the small changes that you have made in your content and the way that you're communicating. And I think it really has made a huge difference in how your audiences are working back with you and engaging with you in this new normal. But thank you so much again for tuning in. I'm gonna hand it off now, I believe, to Tony.
Yes, hello, hi everybody. Thank you for joining us as well. Just echo what Erin said. You all have been doing so much good work over the last 2 months. I mean, and even before that, but hopefully over this hour you have a chance to just sit back and maybe relax a bit and just listen to some of the things that we're saying. And Erin, I just want to say to your point about remembering that everybody in this, we're human beings first, from our audience to the people behind the scenes. That's something that we have talked a ton about at West Virginia as well. Just doing our work and having compassion and patience as we do all of the things that we have done, and just remembering that as we go through things. So Megan, go ahead and flip to that first slide that I have. And we can get started. So one of the key things that we figured out early on in this process, early March, when we decided to really announce that we were going to have an extra week after spring break where students would not come back, so our faculty could prep for online classes and then eventually move online for the rest of the semester. We were sending out messages without having all of the answers. So in that situation, we knew that it was crucial for us to answer as many questions as we possibly could, because we didn't have everything figured out whenever we put out that initial message, and we were getting information as it came up. A lot of people had questions, and I think in normal times we probably would not have responded to as many of the questions or comments as we have, but we've tried to, anybody who had a legitimate question on all of our platforms, we have tried really hard to respond. And in my mind, we did that to build some confidence and trust, and I think that's really important right now in higher ed generally, is that trust between a student or an employee and the institution. There's a gap now in that we are not all together, and so I think it's harder to build that confidence and trust. But answering questions and giving out as much information as we had, being transparent, was really key for us to try to keep that trust between all of our different audiences. So I'll talk about a Q&A response sheet in a second, but I wanted to specifically mention Reddit. And for us at WVU, Reddit was a really important platform, and I think I have a poll that will pop up here in a couple of seconds. Just wondering if Reddit has been part of your engagement strategy during the pandemic. But generally, I mean, I love Reddit for a couple of reasons, but one of the main things is that it's really like a gut or reality check. And that they will not pull punches and responding to things that you say and answers to questions. So it was a good judge of how we were handling things. What we did specifically with Reddit is, depending on the announcements that we had coming out, we developed specific threads where we would ask people, if you have questions, please put them in that thread. And that was helpful for us to make a whole conversation and then be able to answer them over time. So really for our, there we go. Okay, so Reddit has 82% saying no, and I was kind of expecting that. And honestly, Reddit has been it's kind of new for us too. In the fall, we finally put somebody on it specifically to really monitor and look at, but we have really seen the value in Reddit lately. So that's something that I would say, if you're not looking at least make sure that you have somebody there that's kind of looking and listening. So go ahead and flip to the next slide there. Another thing that we did just to keep a closer eye on the questions that we had is we created a Google Sheet, which is, you see a screenshot here of what that looks like. We did that to try to pull our resources together. We were getting questions on social, we were getting questions via email, getting questions via phone call, and there were so many people involved in that process that we tried to really make it easier for folks. So we had a bunch of people who were monitoring accounts, monitoring email accounts, be able to add questions into this document. And then we had some specific folks at our university who were tasked with developing answers and putting them into this document. And then from there, the people on our team who initially posted these questions in the document could then take that answer and form it into any way that they would like. You know, for Twitter, obviously some of these answers are a little too long, shorten them, make them work, and kind of move forward. It really made things a whole lot easier for us as we went through this, so that, you know, our person who was managing Instagram didn't have to make sure that they, you know, asked a question that was probably answered already. You could kind of see an answer, see if there was overlap, and be a little bit more efficient. So that was really helpful. We continue to use this. We aren't seeing as many questions on social, at least. We're still getting a good bit via email, and I think our parents are the ones that are probably engaging with questions the most right now, but we're still continuing to use that. Then we can go to that next slide. And then, so whenever we made the decision to move off campus and continue the semester online, our social media team did a really good job of quickly starting to talk about how do we continue to get that spirit across from our campus. We talk a lot at WVU, and I'm sure on your campuses as well, about campus life, community, the spirit. There's a feeling of coming on campus. We talk a lot about that, and that goes away whenever people aren't on campus. So we realized that, you know, we had to try to replicate it, because that is a big selling point for us at WVU. And for that reason, you know, we tried to adapt some of those traditions and move it forward. So let's move to the next slide, and I've got two examples to show you of how we've kind of replicated spirit of campus at WVU. So the first one is a singing of country roads, and at WVU we sing country roads a lot. It's one of the first things that our freshmen do. We do that after students graduate. We do it after football, basketball, all of our athletics victories. But we usually do it in a group, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, and obviously that's not happening anymore, especially with the fact that we're not doing commencement in person. You know, we didn't have the end to our spring sports season. So we developed the idea to have some of our biggest celebrities, West Virginians, natives and grads, sing a few lines of country roads and pull it all together into a video that we debuted around a 10-year anniversary of when our WVU basketball team made the Final Four. it just kind of timed out perfectly, and our athletics department was a good partner in helping share some of this information. So we asked others to sing, record, and send us their song as well, and that was great from an engagement standpoint. And generally, it came at a time whenever I think people needed something positive, needed something to watch that lifted spirits. This was, fairly, it was still in March whenever we did this, I believe, and it really, I think, helped boost campus, boost our audiences a bit. And then we can move on to the last slide. This is an example actually from earlier today. We launched our second video premiere of either a sunset or a sunrise, and this is a sunrise that you're seeing here. This is just a quick little 10-second time lapse of what we showed, but this ended up actually being a premiere that was 45 minutes of a sunrise, slowly going across the sky, showing off our campus. And it's simple, you go and you record something. In traditional times, we would have done this and then, did what I did here, make it 10 seconds and use a time lapse of it. But we kind of thought that this is something for people who have more time. We also thought that this is a perfect example of what I've kind of termed like multi-purpose content. Generally, in the comments and as people are watching it, it reconnects people with campus. I think we need a lot of that right now. So it does that. Alumni especially engage with this, but we see our other audiences as well. The other thing that we did with this video is attach some calming music to it. So if somebody wanted to sit and just listen or study and relax while they were able to watch it, that's another piece of this, makes it valuable. What we've seen with the one that we did prior to this is that people are going back to it. So it kind of gives me an idea that people are listening to the music and doing that just as much as they're watching the full thing. So this idea has really done a good job of engaging alumni. And like I said, we're seeing people go back to that content. So hopefully that it is pretty evergreen even when we get back to normal times. So I think that's all I've got for you today. So I will pass it on over to John.
Thanks so much, Tony, and thanks to Erin as well. Man, Erin and Tony do such an incredible job with this community building stuff. So glad to have their insight and their example shared here. Looking at the hashtag, it looks like a lot of takeaways there for a lot of us who are tuning in today. And so really cool to be able to see that happening. But man, I love that social care idea, the social care idea that Erin talked about, and that's been resonating a lot, I think. That idea of signing DMs with the social media manager names, I think was really cool. And then Tony, just the incredible amount of care going into answering all those questions. And man, I love that time lapse idea. So much good stuff there. Keep chiming in on the hashtag, everyone. And we do have a couple questions coming in as well. So keep using that module in your GoToWebinar control panel to submit some questions, and we'll get to those briefly. Okay, for my portion here, man, March has been crazy to look back on. This is a look at what a lot of March looked like for me, just announcement after announcement, update after update. Man, March felt like a year. April felt like a week to me. I think that might be similar for a lot of us. We're pointing everyone, obviously, to this coronavirus landing page. And our friends at Campus Sonar have showed just how much conversation is out there, right? So none of us have to be convinced that we were pumping out so much content, right? Keeping our audiences and our communities informed and apprised of what's going on. But also the monitoring of all of this has just been so much. There's so much conversation out there. So waking up every day in that second half of March, I was very cheaty-like from the good place. I was just asking what every single morning, like what is happening next? What is going on? What in the world? How are we going to adapt? But I think eventually I got to a point after going full cheaty, although I think I still have a lot of cheaty in me, it was time to take a step back. And this wasn't immediate, that's for sure. But I think after the first few days of messaging, even though there's a lot of uncertainty out there, I was able to step back, take a breath, and then look at what our community needed beyond just the announcements, right? Like we've got to nail the announcements. Obviously, that's important. Like people need the nitty gritty. Those announcements need to be worded well. It's a lot that's on our plate to make sure we get the most pertinent information out there. But is there room for some more? Can we add value somewhere else? And what are your community's unique needs? As I share a few examples of what we've been able to do at BYU, obviously all of our communities are very unique and different. They all have different wants and needs and opportunities and challenges. So a few things I'll share that we've seen in our community. And this community building content for us really started after I scrolled into this article late on a Thursday night on Twitter. You've all probably seen similar articles by now, but talking about just what this social isolation could do and is doing to us as individuals, the need for staying socially connected while being physically distant. Reading this kind of connected some dots for me and made me say, okay, like as a community manager on social media, how can I help bring people together during this physically distant time? Our first piece of community building content came that next day. So that was Thursday night. I read the story. I came in with some ideas Friday morning, and the president of the university actually pulled me into a meeting with my boss and said, hey, I want to share a message about community. And it was extremely fortuitous that we were on the exact same page. But he shared, as you can see there, almost a 6-minute video. Like this was long, but he expressed so much empathy and care and kind of inspiration as well that our audience really needed, and it resonated well. A lot of people just needed that signal from the university leader to say, okay, we're still together here. That led into a next project later that week where we crowdsourced to all of our faculty. Not all of them. I sent about 100 emails. We got about 35 videos back, just short Instagram story segments of faculty offering words of kind of comfort, support, and encouragement. We launched this the day before we switched to online learning. So there was a lot of uncertainty out there in our community of, what the heck is this going to look like moving forward? And so that message of reassurance really resonated. And this was my favorite DM. This was kind of mission accomplished here, making me feel like BYU is still home even amidst the uncertainty. Okay, that's what we want. And so with this stuff resonating, we felt kind of emboldened and empowered to do more of it. A nice part of this project, by the way, was featuring so much faculty. This was an interesting kind of micro influencer model where we had different parts of our community resonating with these different faculty members. Oh, I love this professor. Oh, I miss this professor. So great to hear from them. So great to see their face. So that was our initial foray into this more community-focused content outside of just the COVID announcements. And it left me with this question, and I think it's a question worth all of us considering as you look at what Tony and Erin have been doing. Is there room in our actual crisis communication plans to put in a community building consideration? I think our plans are so focused on getting the immediate information out there, and again, that is crucial. But should we build into our processes some sort of community building content? I think that's a question worth all of us considering. In my final few minutes here, I just want to talk about graduation, since we had our graduation last week and it did not look like this, that's for sure. But since we went through it, and I know that's top of mind for a lot of us in the higher ed social media community right now, I'll just share a bit about what we learned about community building here. Again, the big question for us going into it is how do we adapt this year with things so different? But more specifically, the big question we had is how do we communicate with empathy while still celebrating? Because we knew our community was not okay. They wanted to celebrate together, And we could show empathy with that because we want that too. Like especially as personal social media managers, like that's my favorite day of the year in this job. And so in a few DMs, like I shared that kind of in that same vein as Erin signing things with her own name in the DMs. I'm talking about like, hey, we know this sucks. Like even me as a social media manager, I wish we could all be together, but we can't right now. We've got to stay safe. We've got to take care of each other. So with every piece of content we were sharing in graduation, at the start of each day that we had content, we were sharing messaging like this, like towing this line of let's celebrate, but hey, like we understand a lot of you are frustrated, disappointed, and hurt. That's totally fine. We all wish we could be together, but like we hope you'll find some way to celebrate in your own way and feel joy. Here are some ways to do that. This isn't an exact replication. We understand this. This isn't a substitution, but we want to help you if you want to celebrate. And there was a lot of sentiment like this out there, like calling us tone deaf still, even walking this line. I don't think any of us are immune from the hurt and frustration that's out there. And these students, they want to direct this somewhere, right? And we're an easy target for that as social media managers. But with all of our monitoring beforehand and seeing what was out there with graduation, we did come to the conclusion that grads wanted to be celebrated. They just didn't want to be celebrated the wrong way. And again, that doesn't mean this is easy by any stretch of the imagination. Feature stories of our graduates, always a good idea. These templates we launched on the Monday of graduation week did really, really well for us. We were actually surprised how much these were adopted and utilized. And we also felt like starting with this at the beginning of graduation week kind of eased our community into the celebration and also kind of gave them permission to celebrate. We felt like this was a little bit empowering for them. Like, here's an easy way to test the waters. Put out these templates. They're getting lots of responses from their followers. Oh, this is so fun to look back on. Just an easy way to get people into the mood. On graduation day itself, we had another video from the president, which was great. And then we did these Instagram story segments like we did with the faculty in that initial segment. But as you can see, we had more time with this one. We produced a little better, put a template on the background, and had these 14-second Instagram graduation speeches that went really well for us and our community liked seeing. And then the UGC, I was kind of blown away at the user-generated content. We aggregated it all here. You can see some really long captions here. What I noticed is that the quantity of uses of the hashtag on Instagram this year, our graduation hashtag was far lower than usual, but the quality of posts seemed to be a lot higher. Without kind of all the hustle and bustle of events with graduation, it seemed like graduates kind of had some more time for reflection, for introspection, and that translated into some really, really cool anecdotes we were able to see on social media and some very creative graduation photos as well. So out of all of our content pieces during the week, it was this post where we linked and pointed people to the user-generated content that got the most engagement and was the most successful for us. People wanted to celebrate together and see what each other were posting. And that brings me to my final point here, is that in this community building content, it's so effective to speak with our community and not just at our community. And through crowdsourcing projects like we've been able to do here, that really gives our community members a voice and really allows them to speak with each other, to connect with each other, not just top-down messaging from a faceless account, but giving our community members a voice and a platform can be so effective as they speak with each other. Okay, that brings us to this question portion of our webinar. Oops, I'm gonna put that back up. So we'll open things up for questions here. I know it sounds like Erin has one question assigned to her so far, so I'm gonna throw it back to Erin, and we'll kind of try to do a bit of a round robin here around the horn with Tony and I, and address those questions of yours coming in.
I'm sharing my webcam, Tony and John, if you would like to join me.
Oh yeah.
I'm here.
Hello. So the first question we got, I think, is a great question. It's something that I see pop up a lot of the time in any conversations around higher ed social media. And so this comes from Ramona, and she's wondering, she's in charge of departmental social channels. And so how do main channel managers, especially in this time of need and crisis, see those departmental channels and the content that they're creating? And, stereotypically, and I think historically, there's been some tension between those two areas on campus. And so to jump in really quickly here with my answer is that personally, I love when department channels are creating good content, and I really love partnering with them. The truth of the thing is that it makes my job way easier. And so whenever we're able to collaborate and work together on a piece of content, or I'm aware of what you're working on for, let's say, Student Employment Week, I know, okay, well, I can count on that to be part of my content as well, because I'll share what you're working on. And so I think it's a really interesting relationship that can be really fruitful when like people come together and actually collaborate. I will say that with crisis, the one thing that I do struggle with from time to time is that a lot of the times there's specific things that need to be said in a specific way, or things that we're not sharing on social for a particular reason. And so that can also be a challenge. So if there's ever a time where you want to share crisis communications on your departmental channels, I always recommend reaching out and checking with the main team if you can, because there could be a reason that it's not being shared. And so that's one of the things that I notice in crisis comms is that, they'll share a message out before the main channels do. And, there's some language that we wish we would have done a little bit differently and things like that. So that's the big thing. But ultimately, I think it's an awesome opportunity to connect with people. And, particularly in this time, the one thing that I've been doing is anytime we're sharing any of that content, I'm tagging our housing system. Each house has an Instagram account. I'm tagging our dining services, our student center, our alumni account, our library account, some of the main brand pillars, so that they can share the Instagram stories and other content directly to their channels, and they're notified that it's happening, so that they don't have to think of a way to word it for their channels. They can choose to create it on their own, or they can just point to the content that we created already from the main channel. But Tony and John, what are your thoughts on that? This is a question I see all the time.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I have seen more and more value of some of those, what I guess would call smaller accounts in my mind. We have some specific safety social media accounts at WVU. Our health sciences accounts have been really significant in sharing critical information around just staying safe and healthy in this time. And even down into our colleges and schools, making sure that they're getting the messages out as widely as possible. One of the things that we did early on was to create a social media toolkit for all of our social media managers across campus. So we had some specific graphics that we wanted them to use, gave them an idea of what a message could be. If they wanted to copy and paste and post, they could. If they wanted to adapt it, they were more than welcome to as well. But just kind of giving them that readily available content, I think they appreciate that, but then it also opens up a line of communication back and forth. So we have seen more and more folks reach out to us and say, hey, we've got this coming out about a virtual recruitment event or about a fundraising campaign. Can you share this? That's what I wish we did more of that. And this situation, I think, has kind of helped show the value in that from my side of things.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This collaboration in crisis, I think, is so important, and that can seem to not be a priority a lot of the time, especially for those of us in central comms, right? Because we're wearing so many hats and trying to get so much information out there. So I always appreciate when someone else running another account on campus can reach out to us and say, hey, we've got this idea. Can we partner together? But really, it's about adding value, right? Like we've got to walk these lines of sharing accurate information for sure, especially with the initial crisis response. But then community building wise, like, yeah, let's add value together and think strategically how we can do that. Okay, Tony, do you have a question?
Yeah.
I think I do. Can you guys hear me? My computer is giving me some trouble.
We
You're
can
doing good.
still hear.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So I got the question that I can see right now is, as we move into summer, have we thought about engagement plans and things like that? And I guess from my side of things, you know, summer for us is a lot about in engaging new students, talking about our new student orientation and doing a lot of that. So we're really working on a way that we can try to engage our incoming students as much as possible and make it so they can still connect and find friends and do those types of things that they would find it a whole lot easier to do in traditional means with a in-person orientation session. So that's what our focus has been, but I think we'll have to look at some of those other audiences as we get closer to the time. Right now, our team is really focused in on getting through commencement and hoping that all goes well, and then we will shift in that way. What about you guys?
For us, so one of our traditions is a sophomore summer, and so sophomores typically have part of their curriculum is spending a summer term on campus, and there are other students on campus, but generally it's mostly the sophomore students. And it's a really awesome opportunity because of the way we're on quarters here. And so once you kind of wrap up your sophomore year, you're on internship, studying abroad. And so it's one of the times that the class can really come together. And so that's something that we're actively trying to figure out how to navigate, because that's an experience that people talk about for years, and it's now an experience that they're going to have to experience in a different capacity, and so it's a challenge. I don't have a solution yet, because we want to honor that and to be mindful of that, and we actually have a kind of similar question on my end here, but we also want to celebrate and honor, like, seniors graduating from high school. You got into college, you're going to college. That's a huge thing. And so, like, it's this balance of huge important moments that some are changed permanently and can't ever be recaptured, and other ones, there's an opportunity for us to capture it in a new and a different way. And it's been challenging to figure out how to balance that.
Yeah, you mentioned study abroads, Erin. That's a huge part of our strategy for summer content. Our kind of unofficial campus motto is "The world is our campus," and which has an interesting meaning right now with remote learning, but typically we tie into that with a lot of the study abroad stuff that we do. We've done a ton of takeovers on Instagram. That's kind of our bread and butter is takeovers, and study abroad takeovers have been really fun. Obviously, none of that happening this summer, so we're trying to innovate with takeovers, which is really hard because we want that peer-to-peer content to continue, but man, we don't want to take over from a student that's just them in their apartment all day. Like, it's got to be visually interesting still. So we're trying to walk that line. And Tony, you mentioned incoming students. It's been kind of fascinating to see our incoming class innovate on their own. So they started an Instagram account on their own called BYU Class of 2024. I think there's a lot of those around now, but they're doing Zoom calls with like 90 people, like introducing themselves to each other, like already before their high school year is even done. So it's been interesting to see them innovate and also kind of crave that connection with each other. And so we'll definitely be looking for ways to leverage that and to try to figure that out, because man, this is a weird experience for incoming students. Like, such, for them, like being on campus, orientation stuff, like moving in, move-in day, that first day on campus is just such a rite of passage, and it's all so uncertain right now. So crazy times to look at. Okay, a question for me that I think all of us can kind of weigh in on. A great question from Katie here is looking at getting buy-in from administration with community building content, and how to kind of work with them through all of this when maybe they see the immediate announcements as being such a priority. How do we get to the community building content and work with them? For us, it's gone really smoothly. I think we're fortunate to have an administration who really trusts us on this community building stuff. And honestly, we've done so many of these projects before we got into crisis that I think our administration is kind of trained to know, okay, like this is normal for us to do the kind of crowdsourcing, to have our community members speak this way. But Tony, maybe talk about your president, who's a huge face for everything you're doing on social media, right?
Yes, he has been so critical in our messaging generally. And for us, it's, we have tried to use him as, he's in his house, by himself. So the videos that he's doing, traditionally we do a video series where it's recorded, taped, edited, and all of that. He's doing weekly videos now, recorded on his phone or iPad, and we're sharing them out. And just, some things are fun and engaging, talking about his, the top 5 books he's read. We've asked him what's in his fridge right now, how is he, staying healthy and eating those types of things. But generally, it's just nice, I think, for him to have a voice out there and to be a person behind a brand. I think sometimes it can be a challenge, when it's just a logo, and to try to get that type of engagement. So we do use folks like that. Our president, our vice president for health sciences, Clay Marsh, is a big factor in our state in terms of helping to determine what we're going to do from a health standpoint. And he has been really active on Twitter specifically as well. So we're trying as hard as we can to use those personalities too.
Sorry. It's just always like such an interesting, because we're kind of a different entity here a little bit, just because our community has been like the #1 strat, and not that no one else's has been, but like our community is like what people know about Dartmouth, is that the network, the community that you develop here is with you for life, and it's home. We, like, all of our slogans when people come back for reunions is welcome home. And so the community comes very naturally here. What I think is really important, and a good argument, or not an argument, but a case to make for yourself constantly, is that your community is now all digital. Like, they don't have one-on-one time with the wellness center. They don't have the opportunity to jump into, like, run into the library and study late. They don't have this opportunity to have FaceTime with, the student center manager to figure out planning events and all these different things. They don't have those opportunities anymore. And that's a crucial part of the higher education experience. And so how can it won't apples to apples, like in some cases, I think some of these virtual things are possibly better. Like, I think those wellness meditation things, you can still have the in-person one, but Zoom ones would be awesome, because I know the #1 deterrent for me about an event is that I forget to actually stand up and leave in time. And so, thinking about it in that way, and reminding people that this is where our community is, and digital is the only place that we're really having that contact with them. I mean, from email to website to Zoom calls to social, it's digital. So that's been my kind of spiel on that, because I don't know, like, to me, and I know to us, it's very natural, but I think framing it that way can help people realize that, oh, yeah, they are all digital now.
Awesome. I think we're right up against time here, so maybe we end there, but I think that's a great point to end on, Erin. A huge thanks again to you both, Erin and Tony, for joining in. Hope you've enjoyed this as much as I did. It's always just so helpful to talk through this stuff together, right? To have a chance to talk through it and think through it and kind of evolve and evaluate. So a huge thanks to you both. A big thanks to Megan Miller as well, who's been behind the scenes setting up all the tech for this and running the slides. Thank you, Megan. If you tuned in late, any of you, the slides will be, or the recording of this will be available at eduwebconf.com. Give us some time to get that uploaded and posted there, and you can follow eduWeb Conf on Twitter as well for an update with that. And stay tuned for our next webinar. We don't have the exact details nailed down yet, but I know that the team is looking at a really interesting individual who's gone kind of viral in the world of social media for a unique brand they're working for, that could give us some really interesting